Thank you all for being here today and for inviting me to the Vegan Fest. I'm super excited to be here. I've never been to Madison before, and it's been awesome so far, so thank you again. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. So I'm going to give you a little bit more of my background just so that you know where I'm coming from and what my experience is, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some trends and ways to advocate for veganism. And then we're going to talk about some myths and misinformation that seem really prevalent, and we're going to try to bust some of those myths together and educate each other on veganism and performance as a vegetarian or vegan. We're going to talk a little bit about how to fuel, so how to train and how to eat for whatever your goals may be. And because we have a large college population here, I'm going to talk about how to do that on a budget as well. And then we will, I'm going to try to keep this to about 30 to 35 minutes so that we have some time for Q&A. And as Mikey said, afterwards, then I will be at a table so we can talk more then 2 times during the day. So you'll have plenty of time to eat lots of food and do lots of talking. So with that, we will get into the presentation. So again, a little bit about who I am. So I am Bridget Flynn, and I, as Mikey said, have degrees in religious studies and environmental ethics and a minor in sociology. I do not have a degree in dietetics or nutrition. However, I have been a competitive athlete for my entire life, over 20 years, and have been vegan for the last 9 years, vegetarian for 10. So I have done lots of research and have been involved in these arenas for quite some time, and we're all still learning together. So just so that you know right off the bat, I'm not a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, but I have been doing this for quite some time and have a really vast interest in these topics. I'm also a sustainability coordinator at a college, so the environmental aspect of veganism is something that really appeals to me and I know quite a bit about as well. Also at Oberlin, I'm the advisor for Oberlin Animal Rights, and as Mikey mentioned, I previously did some vegan community organizing with Indie Vegans in Indianapolis and Bloomington, Indiana, and interned with Mercy for Animals. A little bit more about my kind of trajectory into what I'm doing now. So as I mentioned, I have been an athlete my whole life, pretty much played every sport you can play as a girl. That means I did softball, basketball, volleyball, track, cross country, swimming, and as I mentioned, have been vegan for 9 years. In college, I got into taekwondo and ran a couple half marathons. And eventually I did a Tough Mudder, which, is anyone familiar with Tough Mudder? Quick, yeah, so a lot of people know what that is. It's a 10 to 12 mile mud adventure race, basically. So it's set up sort of the way that the British Special Forces training is. So it aims to get at all of your phobias, essentially. So you jump into fire, jump into freezing cold water, scale walls, and a lot of mud. So you can see we were very muddy. You get electrocuted a lot too. So yeah, and I paid to do that, right? So afterwards, I was really proud that I had completed this effort and felt, when I was telling people about it, they were like, wow, you did a Tough Mudder, and I felt, really good about it. But I felt like I didn't look exceptionally fit. I just looked kind of normal. So I decided that I wanted to look fit. That was my goal. And because I like to train with a competition in mind, I decided to try bodybuilding because it's an aesthetic sport. So in bodybuilding, you do lift a lot of weights to build muscle, but in competitions, you're just judged on what you look like. So you don't actually lift weights in competition. You're on stage presenting your physique. So bodybuilding is strictly an aesthetic sport, not to be confused with powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting. So the picture here of me doing a deadlift, that would be a powerlifting movement. And the picture down at the bottom is me in my most recent competition in April in Cleveland. The one where I'm really, really tan. You probably can't tell even which one is me. I am the one second over from the right. So it's strictly an aesthetic sport. So you're based on what you look like and how you present your physique on stage, which involves a lot of posing, obviously tanning, a lot of hair and makeup, all that good stuff. So bodybuilding is by far the most intense athletic endeavor I've ever participated in because it involves everything, your sleep, your diet, your training, and then all the other beauty kind of stuff, you know, straightening my hair, wearing the makeup, getting your spray tan. You have to prep your body for your tan, all kinds of different things. So it's a very intense endeavor. And a couple people had asked me, I was here yesterday, about, you know, the dieting process and what eating for a competition actually means. So to give you some context, I cut for my show in 18 weeks. So I was dieting basically for 18 weeks, which involves weighing and measuring essentially all the food that I eat, which means not going out to eat with people really. Yeah, I have a scale in my kitchen. I literally weigh and measure all my food 6 times a day. I eat, bring it all to work. If I'm traveling anywhere, I have my little cooler. So it's a very intense endeavor. So all that is to say is bodybuilding is a very intense sport, and I know it's also very weird. A lot of people are really surprised at how tan I am. So if you have any weird questions about bodybuilding, I'm happy to talk about those kind of things too. Nothing is off limits. So if you want to talk about diet, workouts, supplements, why I'm so tan, any of those things, we can talk about that in the Q&A. Don't have to be shy, I promise. If I can get on stage in a bikini, I can field your questions. All right, I want to make one other quick point in this picture. So I mentioned that bodybuilding is an aesthetic sport, and I cut for a show to lose weight. So that means that there's a lot of body manipulation in order to do bodybuilding. So, you know, in the off season, I carry around a little more weight. In the show, I'm the leanest usually that I am all year. So I don't look like that all year round. That's a picture from my very first show in 2014. And I also want to basically make the point that I'm not promoting a certain type of body. The way I got into veganism was I wanted some authority to look fit as I'm talking about veganism. But I'm certainly not advocating that everyone should do bodybuilding or that you need to be lean to be vegan. To me, being vegan is not necessarily about health, and it's not necessarily, or it's not a tool for weight loss. For some people it is, but that's primarily, to me, not what it's about. It's about reducing suffering and expanding your circle of compassion to include animals. So to me, that's always my primary reason to be vegan. There's lots of other great reasons to be vegan, but that's not necessarily what it's about to me. So I had read an article by Dr. McDougall, actually, who had said that he basically criticized fat vegans, and I think that there should be vegans of all body types. So just wanted to make a quick point that I'm not advocating that everyone needs to look like me or that everyone needs to be lean to be vegan, and that your fate as a vegan is not, you aren't fated to be pale or scrawny or weak, and that there are lots of vegans in all kinds of different arenas who are disproving that stereotype. I know vegans who do MMA, who do arm wrestling, who do Olympic weightlifting, who do powerlifting. There's vegans in the, you know, that play pro football. There's bodybuilders, there's CrossFit athletes. Anything that you want to be, you can do as a vegan. So before we get into busting some of those myths, I want to talk about effective messaging a little bit, and to just kind of keep these things in mind as we're learning together and as we kind of educate and talk with other people. So one of the things that I've noticed over the past, you know, nearly a decade of advocating for veganism is that there's been a few trends. When I first went vegan, most people didn't actually know what that meant. Once I did explain it to them, they were shocked. They couldn't believe that you could be vegan, let alone be an athlete who was vegan. Whereas now when I tell people, even at the gym, where I'm, you know, lifting really heavy weights, or even at a competition, people are pretty surprised, but they're much less shocked. So I think that is a really encouraging trend, that people, one, understand what veganism is now and are a little bit less shocked, because it has become so much more prominent in the mainstream in athletics, that people think that it's actually possible now, and I think that's a really encouraging trend. When I first went vegan, I was really passionate about it, and I couldn't imagine how everyone wasn't vegan, because it just seemed to make so much sense to me, and I kind of forgot about compassion for humans. So that's why I included the picture down at the bottom. So I try to be as compassionate as possible, and to including to humans, not just to other animals, and encourage people on their journey, whether they become fully vegan or whether just they're making small changes. For example, it took my dad about 8 years until he started drinking almond milk, and I think that that's great. We had our first vegan Thanksgiving this year, actually, too, which was really awesome. My whole extended family. It only took 9 years, I joked, but but I think that was really encouraging. So anyway, I like to encourage people as much as possible, so not have an all or nothing mentality. So a lot of times people will say, well, I could be vegan except for cheese. I always am surprised by that, but I'll say, well, go vegan except for cheese. And most people don't actually take me up on that, but I think it's a really important point to encourage people to make small changes that they can as they're potentially looking into veganism, and to try to be an example yourself. I think a lot of people feel really confronted when they hear that you're vegan, because most people do actually care about animals and don't realize that you can opt out of these systems. So automatically they feel really defensive. And if you can just be compassionate, not make people feel embarrassed or stupid for not making the same choices as you, I'm talking to vegans here, then they'll feel a little bit better about potential changes and feel open to being able to ask you different questions. And I found that has been a lot more successful than yelling at people or telling them that meat is murder or those kind of things, but rather to be more compassionate and encourage them on their journey. Again, so for me, it's a focus on animals and to play into people's own ethics. There's been a lot of studies that have come out to say that people who stay vegan the longest are ones who care about animal ethics. And even though there are a lot more people going vegan for environmental and health reasons, unless they also care about the ethical implications of their diets, they don't necessarily stay vegan for the long term. And so I'm just leaving that as food for thought for you. But I tend to try to focus on ethics as much as I can, because to me, veganism, as I said, isn't necessarily about a diet or losing weight. A lot of people do lose weight and feel really great and become healthier as a vegan, but being vegan isn't necessarily healthier. I think we all know the term junk food vegan at this point. I tell people, about that, and they're always like, well, how could you gain weight, or how could you be unhealthy as a vegan? And I said, well, Oreos are technically vegan, potato chips are technically vegan. If you want to be unhealthy as a vegan, you could do that feasibly. And my last little tip as we're going through here is to be honest. And I know that probably sounds pretty basic, but I think it's really important. So you don't have to like all vegan food, and it's okay to admit to people. They appreciate honesty, and you can admit sometimes that being vegan might be more inconvenient, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth it. So I think being honest is really important as we're going through here. So with that, let's talk about some myths and then some facts. So the first one, of course, the question most people get the most is, where do you get your protein? And well, plant foods don't contain protein, but in fact they do. So a lot of plant foods actually contain protein, especially nuts, beans, whole grains, leafy greens, and legumes. So for example, my favorite food is seitan, which in one serving of seitan is between 21 and 30 grams of protein in a single serving. Half a cup of tofu has 10 grams of protein, half a cup of black beans has about 8. Almonds, peanut butter, there's all kinds of different foods which we'll get into. And for context, one hard-boiled egg is 6 grams of protein, so about half a cup of tofu. So plenty of plant foods do, in fact, contain protein. And even more important than that is the amount of protein that people think that you need to eat. So for a sedentary person, you only need, the dietary recommended standard is around 0.36 to 0.54 grams per pound. and a little bit more for endurance athletes and a little bit more for strength athletes. So that's really not too much. The amount of protein that you need for, like I said, a sedentary person is really pretty small. If you're eating enough food, then chances are you're eating enough protein. But the amount of protein that you need will really depend on your activity level, your age, your muscle mass, and other health issues, and physique, your physique goals. Okay, so the next myth is that cow's milk is the best source of calcium. And that is also not true. There are many plant foods that contain calcium and can in fact be better absorbed by the bones. So the issue with calcium is not necessarily just the amount, but also how well your body can absorb calcium. So cow's milk has about a 31% absorption rate, whereas Brussels sprouts have a 64% absorption rate of calcium. So it's not just about the amount, but also how well it can be absorbed by your body. And plant foods tend to absorb calcium quite well, in fact, and there's been numerous studies about calcium that have been pretty interesting in terms of osteoporosis and hip fractures. So in countries where people eat a lot of dairy and a lot of animal protein, the rate of osteoporosis and hip fractures actually tends to be higher. And I have some studies and graphs if people are more interested in citations later on, some supplemental slides. But I think it's really important to note that that is the case. So I drank a ton of milk growing up of cow's milk and thought it was the only way and the best way to have strong bones. And the dairy lobby would tell you that that is the case, but it is patently not true if you look at the studies. So the next one is plant foods have inadequate amino acid profiles, and that's also not true. So a lot of people will say, well, plant foods don't have complete amino acid profiles, or they're incomplete proteins. And there are some plant foods that are complete proteins, but even more than that, the study that most people are citing when they talk about complete proteins is one that was basically debunked almost as soon as it came out about 30 years ago. So as long as you're eating a combination of plant proteins, you're getting a complete amino acid profile. There are, leucine is one amino acid, an essential amino acid, and a lot of plant foods are a little bit less in leucine than animal foods, but essentially you don't need to be worrying about that unless you're a very competitive athlete. Then we can talk about supplementation and things like that. But yeah, that's one that a lot of athletes will always bring up, is that plant foods are incomplete proteins, and as long as you're eating enough proteins and varied proteins, you will get a complete amino acid profile. And amino acids, proteins are basically the building blocks of muscle, and essential amino acids are the ones that your body, that you get through your diet. The other amino acids are ones that are already in your body, but essential amino acids are ones that come from your diet. So they're very important for recovery and for building muscle and muscle protein synthesis, but you can get them through plants. The next one that I hear is that being vegan is very inconvenient, and I don't think that that is true. It literally, for me, gets easier every single day as you continue to learn more about veganism and which places you can go, and also new products are coming out every day, and new research is coming out every day that make being vegan easier and easier. I mean, the fact that you can go into Target now and Walmart and all these different stores and find vegan dressings and vegan mayo, and Ben & Jerry's now has a vegan ice cream line. I mean, it literally does get easier every single day, both through your own learning where you can go and what you like, and then also with new products coming out and becoming more and more available. So I don't actually think it's super inconvenient. A lot of people think that you need to be able to cook or like cooking to be vegan, and I'm a great example of that not being true. I love baking, but if it takes more than 10 minutes to cook, chances are I'm not going to do it. So you do not have to like to cook. As I mentioned, I eat a lot, so I do not like to spend a lot of time on cooking or preparing food, and you do not need to spend a lot of time preparing food necessarily, unless you like to, and then we'll all learn from you, and that's why there's going to be amazing demos later on today. But I'm not the person to get that advice from, so you do not need to be able to cook or spend a lot of time on your food. The next one is you can't get all your vitamins and minerals through eating a vegan diet, and that is also not true. All necessary micronutrients can be obtained through plant sources, even B12 and iron. B12 actually comes from bacteria, so there's nothing that you need to get it from animals, and if you're worried about it, you can supplement with a B12 supplement, but you can also get it from nutritional yeast and fortified milks, and all kinds of different things contain B12. So generally you don't need to worry about it, and you don't need to eat animals to obtain B12, and same with iron. Plenty of plant foods contain iron, all sorts of different foods. So next one is, of course, competitive athletes require animal products, and as we have already talked about, that is not true, and there's plenty of vegan athletes disproving that, or proving rather, that you can compete in various arenas as a vegan and do very well. We've known that in the endurance athletics world for a long time, but now there's more and more vegans who are competing in strength sports and all kinds of different sports as vegan athletes, and I think that's really exciting. So, what then do we eat? Here's a whole big list of a bunch of different foods that I like. Some of my favorite foods, as I already mentioned, include seitan. I love Brussels sprouts and lots of different vegetables. There's all kinds of different things that you can eat as a vegan, and all kinds of different substitutes that you can use to mimic different foods that you might have been used to as a omnivore. So I want to make another little point here, which is a lot of omnivores think that vegan proteins, they don't realize are actual proteins, and sometimes that's because plant foods and certain things do contain protein, but they might not necessarily be primarily protein. So this is the caloric ratio of black beans, which is a great protein source, about 8 grams of protein in half a cup. But as you can see, it falls more into carbs. So it's primarily a carb, but it does have a lot of protein. So as opposed to chicken or other animal sources of protein that are a little bit higher on the protein ratio and lower on the carb and fat ratio, that's why a lot of omnivores don't necessarily understand that other plant foods do contain quite a bit of protein, but not all of them are primarily protein. So that's an example with beans. Tempeh and tofu are also very high in protein, and tofu is also really low in fat. Tempeh has a little bit more fat, but both of them are pretty low in carbs. So just be aware as you're looking at different foods what their macronutrients are. So macros, as you might have heard before, macronutrients are just those carbs, fats, and proteins. Those are the most essential nutrients. Another tip with what to eat is to drink lots of water. So I mentioned that in beverages, it probably goes unsaid, but I think it's really, really important to drink a lot of water. It is so important to every bodily function, digestion, your transportation of nutrients, your circulation, maintaining your body temperature, your electrolyte balance, energizing your muscles, keeping you from overeating. There's a lot of really important functions that water plays, and it's pretty easy to just carry a water bottle around with you. So drink enough water. It's really important. All right, there's a few other foods I want to mention just because I really like them. So at the bottom here is black bean pasta, black bean spaghetti, and it's really good and really high in protein and very delicious. It's a new food. Again, as new foods come out, it becomes easier and easier to be vegan, and that's a newer food that I really enjoy. Next to it is nutritional yeast, which I buy by the pound as much as possible as I can fit in my little reusable bags is how much nutritional yeast I buy because I love it. So I would encourage you to try nutritional yeast. It doesn't have a very appealing name, but it's very good, I promise. So in terms of how to eat, I want to mention a few different ways because there is no one right way to eat as a vegan. You'll see vegans who eat really high carbs, who eat really low carbs, who eat really high fats, who eat no oil, who eat mostly junk foods and mock meats and all kinds of different alternatives and goodies, and other people who eat no processed foods and eat a completely whole foods, plant-based diet. People who do fasting, people who eat 8 meals a day. There's all different ways to eat as a vegan, and I'm not here to tell you the right way for you, because it will depend on your body and your goals and your health and your aspirations, but there's many different ways that you can eat as a vegan and eat according to your goals. So whether your goal is for health or performance or happiness, there's a lot of different ways that you can eat. And some different ones that you might have heard about before are if it fits your macros, or IIFYM. That's a really popular new one, or flexible dieting in the fitness world. There's meal plans, so as I mentioned before, that I weigh and measure most of my food and eat 6 times a day, so that's a pretty strict meal plan. There's people who advocate for intuitive eating, or just eating whatever foods you want whenever you feel like it, and listening to your body. There's all different ways to eat, and it really depends on what your goals are. Another important thing to note when thinking about how to fuel your body is nutrient timing. So as you can see on this graph here, I would debate whether or not timing and supplements where they go a little bit, but energy balance, or like the calories that you're taking in, is the most important thing. And then the macronutrients that we talked about before, so your ratios of proteins, carbs, and fats, and then your micronutrients, so making sure that you're getting everything that you need. And then on top of that is nutrient timing. So for example, that means a lot of you are familiar with people drinking a protein shake when they're done working out. It's not just for looks, that's actually for good reason. There are lots and lots of studies that show that eating protein when you're done fueling yourself builds your muscles quicker and helps you to recover quicker. So nutrient timing is really important. I stack my carbs around my workouts so that I have the most amount of energy possible during my workouts. So nutrient timing is another thing to consider. Some people really like to have high fats right in the morning, or high carbs right in the morning. Other people like to just have protein in the morning. It really depends on what feels best to you, but especially around your workouts, if you're an active person, carbs and proteins are going to be the most important right after your workout to help you recover quicker and get you on to what you need to do next. So next is, I'm going to mention supplements just a little bit. So supplements aren't necessary for most things. However, they can enhance whatever you're doing. So I really love taking creatine monohydrate. It's, to me, one of the supplements that I've noticed the most gains from. So creatine helps to basically energize your muscles, and it puts more water in your muscles. So when you first start taking it, you might notice a few pounds of weight gain, which is, I think, one reason why a lot of women are afraid to go on creatine. But you can end up, for most people, you can end up lifting heavier or lifting more reps. So especially for activities that require a short-term high intensity, so things where you're lifting weights or running for short bursts or things like that, it's a really great supplement. Things like really aerobic activities, like maybe slow long-term running, things like that, it's not as good for, but especially for lifting weights and short bursts of energy, it's a really great supplement. Another one that can be really great is BCAAs, which are branched chain amino acids. So I mentioned before, you can certainly get all your amino acids through your diet alone, but depending on how deep you get into athletics, potentially supplementing with BCAAs can be really useful. The last thing I'm going to talk about, because I get a lot of questions about it, is illegal drug use. So in bodybuilding, in general, most people are doing drugs. Let's just say that. So I compete in natural divisions, which means that they're drug-tested divisions, whereas most bodybuilding competitions are not drug-tested. So unless they're specifically noted as natural. They're not drug tested, which means generally a lot of people are doing illegal drugs. And because it is still illegal, people can't necessarily talk about it. And there's a lot of people who will be on certain enhancement drugs that they can't talk about it, or they claim to be natural and they aren't. Maybe they were for the first few years, but then they aren't anymore. So a lot of people yesterday at dinner, I met with some of the organizers, were kind of asking about this because there's a lot of ethics at play with illegal drug use. So I think it's important to note that if you see someone who looks too good to be true, chances are it might be too good to be true. So in bodybuilding particularly, as I mentioned, if it's not a natural show, it's not drug tested. So it's a pretty prevalent thing in the bodybuilding world. We can leave it at that, and I'll let you ask other questions if you have them. All right, so we talked a little bit about how to eat, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how to eat cheap. So one of the most important things, I think, is to make your own. So I mentioned that seitan is one of my favorite foods. I make my own seitan, and I actually have the recipe up on my blog, and it was in the newsletter last month. So if you're interested in my seitan recipe, you can find it. So making your own is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do to save money. So I buy wheat gluten, which is what I make my seitan out of, in bulk at a discount grocery, and add nutritional yeast and a few other spices, and it ends up being probably about a fifth of the cost as if I were to buy seitan from the grocery store, and it also has macros that are better tailored to my goals. So my one serving of my seitan that I make is 1 gram of 1 gram of fat, about 4 carbs, and about 21 to 22 grams of protein. So you can make, your foods and end up spending a lot less money and tailor them to what your goals and your own tastes are. The next tip is to eat more simply and get back to the basics. So if you're expecting to save money but eat artisan vegan cheeses, you will probably be sorely disappointed. Whereas if you eat more simple foods like rice and beans, or frozen veggies, things like that, they're going to be a lot cheaper for you. And as I mentioned, if you want those special foods, try making them on your own. So instead of buying an $8 artisan vegan cheese, maybe try making your own out of cashews, which you can buy in bulk. So buying in bulk is another way to save money. Most grocery stores, if you're going to buy a lot of something, will give you a 10% case discount, and then you can also buy things in the bulk section. So instead of buying prepackaged, of your almonds or different things like that, you can buy them in the bulk section, and spices, things like that, tend to be a lot cheaper that way. And another great thing is to actually go to different kinds of groceries and pay attention to sales and things like that. So I know you guys have a Trader Joe's here and Aldi's. Those stores are going to be a lot cheaper than some other stores. So go to different places where they might have different sales or just be cheaper. Pay attention to weekly sales and discounts of foods. You can sometimes save a whole bunch of money by actually paying attention to those weekly specials and getting things at different places. So for example, Aldi had like 33-cent avocados one day, whereas at most store they're about $2. So paying attention to things like that can end up saving you a lot of money. And proper planning goes a really long way too. So if you know you're going to be in a situation where you might not have access to food, or this food is going to be really expensive, like at the airport on my way in here, you can bring your own food and save a lot of money that way, and potentially even reduce your environmental footprint by like bringing your own water bottle as opposed to buying bottled water and things like that. And then the last tip is using coupons and other apps like Ibotta I just started using, which is also really great. I'm not endorsed by them, I'm just trying to give you a tip. But you essentially can save a lot of money using coupons and other apps like that. So all that being said, anything that you want to be, you can be vegan. There are myriad sources of vegan protein, and eating a varied diet, you can acquire all of the macro and micronutrients that you require. And there are a lot of different athletes and individuals all across the globe proving that you can be a vegan athlete and fuel your performance, be competitive, be happy, and be healthy. So hopefully that a little bit answers your question, where you get your protein and how. And with that, we will open it up to discussion. Basically, the reason why people now don't get B12 the way that we used to is because we wash our fruits and vegetables, and we used to get it from soil. So there's nothing inherent of plant or of animal foods that you need B12 from. So most things like nutritional yeast is fortified with B12. All kinds of different non-dairy milks are fortified with B12. All different kinds of things can contain B12. Sure, I actually wrote a blog post on my favorite protein powder too, but there's all different kinds. Raw Fusion is probably my favorite protein powder because it both mimics the amino acid profile of whey. It's a few combinations of plant sources, and it's also really economical and tastes really good and mixes really well. So those are the kind of things that I look at for in a protein powder. So they have a peanut fudge one, and it's amazing. So I really like that one. But there's rice proteins, pea proteins, all kinds of different combination protein powders. So everything from alfalfa and cranberry and quinoa and all different kinds of combinations that are out there. And but yeah, Raw Fusion is one of my favorite, and Plant Fusion is also another good one. Sun Warrior, there's all kinds, but I can refer you to quite a few of them after this if you'd like to. Sure, yeah, sea vegetables actually in general tend to be great sources of quite a few different things. So even like certain omegas can be really great to find in sea vegetables as opposed to taking fish oil or something like that. But yeah, if it's high in calcium, then I'm sure it's a good one. All right, I think we have to wrap up. So I will be at the table right after this if you have more questions. Thank you.